This is my 1-month review of the new M1 Mac Mini from Apple. Let's get into it. In this review, I'm going to talk about my 1-month experience using the M1 Mac Mini. I'm not going to go through benchmarks as a lot of reviewers have done, but I'm just going to talk about my experience using the M1 Mac Mini. Now, to give you a little bit of background of where I'm coming from a 2017 13-inch MacBook Pro without Touch Bar. I still use that computer daily, but my main driver is now the Mac Mini. I use the Mac Mini mostly for all my programming work and my video editing. First of all, let me address why I went with the Mac Mini instead of a MacBook Pro or even the MacBook Air. First, I have an older MacBook Pro already, but now I'm working from home. I spend most of my day in my office here anyway. There's really no need for me to have a laptop. Part of me kind of regrets that decision, but I'll get into that later on. I feel that the Mac Mini is probably the best valued M1 Mac out there. Out of the 3 models that are out there, this is probably the fastest performing one. Of course, you don't get things like the screen and the portability of having a laptop. But all these 3 models have the same M1 chip. All 3 have 2 Thunderbolt 3/USB 4 ports. For me, the 2 ports are not a big deal because that's what I already have on my 2017 MacBook Pro. But to overcome this, I have my CalDigit TS3 Plus dock. But I didn't go with the base model. I did a few upgrades from the base model. I have 16 gigabytes of RAM instead of 8, 512 gigabytes of storage instead of 256. I felt that I wanted to get the most RAM that I could to maximize the life out of this machine. To have a little bit more hard drive space, I have an external SSD drive. I have the Samsung T7 Touch SSD. This is about 500 gigabytes of space. That means I have a total of 1 terabyte of storage. The other thing I already had were a keyboard and mouse, and I already had the external monitor. If I were to describe my overall experience with this new Mac, it would be, wow, this thing is blazing fast. I've had no performance hiccups, and even though it does have a fan, it's never audible. I've never heard it. It's always running because you can feel it if you put your face up to it, but I've not heard it at all. If you compare this to my MacBook Pro, depending on what application you're using, the fans on this machine will make it sound like a jet engine. This is especially true if I'm doing something related to video, whether it be conference calls or video editing. After I got this Mac Mini, I didn't realize how quiet it was in my office. The super fast performance is not only with those applications that have been optimized for the new M1 chip, but also with other Intel-based applications. Most of the applications I've used work perfectly with this new Mac. There are a few applications, especially older ones, that don't work at all, and there are a few plugins that are not yet compatible. First, let me talk about productivity apps. When I talk about productivity apps, I'm mainly talking about a lot of Microsoft apps. The Microsoft Office suite works pretty well, even though it's not yet fully optimized for the new M1 chips. Both Word and Excel take a little bit of time to launch, but it's not too bad. Once they're open, the performance is great. One other app that I use a lot for programming is VS Code, or Visual Studio Code. It's also not yet optimized, but it works quite well. One productivity app that definitely does not work yet is ScreenFlow by Telestream. ScreenFlow is an app I use to create screencast recordings for video tutorials. I have an older version of it, which works fine on my Intel-based Mac running the latest Mac OS, but it doesn't work yet with the new M1 chips. They say it's still in development, but as long as I have my MacBook Pro, I have no need to upgrade. Before I get into my most used app, where I saw a huge performance jump, let me talk about video editing real quick. I use Final Cut Pro. My edits are very simple, and I mostly record in 1080p anyway, so there's definitely no hiccups there. The editing speed is amazing. The one area that I found that didn't work in Final Cut Pro is a set of plugins. In particular, my plugin from Pixel Film Studio. The 2 plugins I'm talking about are the Auto Tracker and the Stabilization plugin. According to the specs, it requires a dedicated graphics card. Even though the new built-in GPU on the M1 chips is probably faster than a lot of dedicated graphics cards, it still doesn't work with the plugins. I contacted Pixel Film Studios and they said they are hoping to get an update out by the end of the year. Other than that, editing video with this machine has been a joy. There has been no lag in scrubbing through the timeline, and exporting videos has been a snap. As far as other creativity apps are concerned, Photoshop, Illustrator, and Lightroom all run fine. Once Adobe updates all of these apps, it's only going to get better. Now to my most used app in an area where I saw the most dramatic performance increase. That would be in the area of web browsing. In particular, I use Chrome as my main browser. I was happy to see that Google released a compatible version of Chrome right before my Mac Mini arrived. I remember opening up Gmail for the first time and just being blown away of how it loaded up right away. Of course, Safari is just as snappy, if not even more, but Chrome is definitely my browser of choice with the different plugins I use and its compatibility with the whole Google suite of apps. It's not that it's so sluggish on my MacBook Pro, but when you compare the performance of the two, it's night and day. Earlier I mentioned that a part of me regrets going with the decision of getting a Mac Mini instead of a laptop. The reason I say that is when I'm not in my office, I'm upstairs with my MacBook Pro. I can't take my Mac Mini upstairs with me. When I'm upstairs with my MacBook Pro, that's when it feels like it's sluggish. It's basically the contrast between going from my Mac Mini here to my MacBook Pro. The only other area that I've seen an issue with is an occasional Bluetooth connectivity issue. I don't know if it's just unique to the Mac Mini or even just unique with my machine, but occasionally when I'm trying to wake up the Mac from sleep, I can't seem to do it, and it takes a long time to wake up. From what I've observed, it's not connecting to my Bluetooth peripherals. I've lost connectivity on different occasions with my Bluetooth keyboard and my Bluetooth mouse. It got to the point where I decided to use the universal USB dongle that a lot of Logitech peripherals have. I haven't had any issues since I started using the USB dongle, but I'll put an update in the comments if it continues to happen. The one thing that is unique with these M1 Macs is the ability to run iOS apps. I will say I don't use that many different types of iOS apps. On my iPhone, the main apps I use are already on Mac OS, such as the podcast app, Safari or Chrome, and YouTube. The one set of apps that I found useful are my home automation apps. If you've seen my other videos, you know I'm a big fan of Wise. I'm happy to say that the Wise app works on the M1 Macs. I can now launch the Wise app and just get a quick view of some of my cameras around my house. Not all the features work though. For example, I can't connect my Wise headphones through the desktop app. I have a feeling that the Bluetooth connection won't translate through. There's a little bit of lag in opening iOS apps, but overall the experience has been okay. I'll say the ability to open up iOS apps on the desktop, it's not a game changer at all. Some of the controls and gestures don't translate over quite well to a non-touch experience on macOS. Also, some of the companies, their apps, they have opted out for it to work on the new M1 Macs. Hopefully this will change in the future and the experience will overall get better. Well, should you get one of these Apple computers with an M1 chip in it? Well, it all depends on where you are at in your computer purchase timeline. If you just spent money on a 16-inch MacBook Pro, well, maybe you can wait. If you've been suffering through an old MacBook Air or any other old Mac waiting for these new chips to come out, I wouldn't hesitate to purchase one of these. Of course, the longer you wait, there's always going to be a faster computer that comes out later. Remember, as fast as these computers are, these are going to be the slowest Macs that Apple makes with their new chips. In other words, every other computer that Apple makes from this point on will be faster and faster. The future M1X or M2 chip will have more CPU cores, more USB ports, and faster everything. But I'm definitely happy with and very satisfied with my purchase. As I mentioned before, Adobe and every other software company out there, they're going to start making updates to their applications and make them more compatible with these new M1 chips. This computer is just going to get even better and better. I hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a like if you enjoyed it and consider subscribing. Until the next one, see ya.